Okay, our animation just finished rendering. And as you can see, I can play it here in the picture viewer. And it does exactly what we saw. So what we want to do is make sure that that rendered out in the location that we saved it, which we said was going to be the desktop. And we were going to call it, let's see, I believe tutorial. And there it is. Sure enough. So, obviously it's a very basic animation. There's nothing going on in it. So, how do we make this look better? Well, first of all, we can add a floor to it. Alright, and that's going to give us just something that we can start casting shadows onto. What I'm going to do is, well, since I've already got keyframes set, I'm going to move the floor down. So it's just above it. And then I'm going to need a light. We're just going to add a very basic light. And we're going to drag this up and a little bit forward. Like that. And in our light settings, what we want to make sure is we go to shadow. We're going to do soft shadow maps. We're going to leave it at 100 for right now. And we might add just a little tint of blue just to give it a little bit of a dynamic color, and you'll notice that that adds a little bit of a hue to our whole scene. So we render that out. Hey, look, we've already got something that looks a little bit more realistic. And by realistic, I mean something that looks like a little bit cooler of an animation. Finally, what we're going to want to do is, since we're starting to animate this scene, is we're going to add a camera. And I'm just going to click this little button here. That's going to basically frame our camera as is, where it is. This is the view that you'll see. And to exit that, just click this button again, and now we can move around our scene and start adding objects. And anywhere I go, if I want to snap back to my camera view, I just click that button. Okay, so let's add a couple more objects here. Let's add in a cube here. Let's add in a cone. And let's add in a sphere here. Alright. And let's go back to our camera view. And let's just render this scene out. Okay, so somewhat interesting. You know, I don't know exactly what you would be going for with this, but this is just giving you a basic idea of how you're going to set up your scene. The last thing we need to do is make a material. So we're going to go down here to create new material. Cinema 4D also gives the option to load a preset, which you should have some preset materials in here. Things like glass, ice and snow, liquid, metal. But we're going to create a material and take a look at it. So bringing in our material, first thing we've got here is color. We can quickly go in and create any color we want. I'm going to create a yellow here. Then we've got luminance. This will make this object shine bright, and you can actually create a luminance channel so that an object itself casts shadows on the scene. But we're not going to use that here. Transparency. We can affect the brightness to set what level of transparency we want. Reflectance is nice. In order to get that really reflecting, we're going to need to add something called a Beckman. And you'll notice right away it turns to this chrome object. And then I can go in here and affect the level of reflectance I want. So think of like a car paint or the side of a building or even glass. You're really going to want to use that. So we're just going to start with that. Color, reflectance. And I'm going to add the yellow to our animated object. And I want to add this to all of them, but I want different colors. So the quickest thing to do is while you're hovering over material, hold down Command and just drag it to the right. Now you've got a duplicate, and now all you have to do is go into your color, pick a new color, and now you've got a second material. Boom. Do that again. Color, let's go with something red-ish. Drag that here, and one more time. Let's go, I don't think I have anything in the green channel. Alright, So now we've got these three objects, and you're starting to notice some very basic reflections going on here. The last thing we're going to do is create an object for the floor. So let's drag this out, and let's make it just a clean white floor. And boom. There's our scene with our objects. You'll notice now when I render, though, it looks a little bit, I don't know, just not very dramatic. So in our render settings, when you come up here, there's a whole list of effects that we can add that will start making this scene look a lot better. The two key ones are going to be ambient occlusion and, oh, sorry, not glow, global illumination. All right. So with ambient occlusion on, you'll notice already we're getting better shadows around the corners here, okay, and a little bit better of a reflection. So this is starting to look a lot better. And now we're going to add global illumination, and you're going to notice how this treats light. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to do what's called an irradiance light cache. So that's going on down here in the corner. It's calculating how this light is reflecting around the scene, and you're already getting an indication of where the ambient occlusion is, where these shadow corners are, what these reflections might look like, and the level of detail we're going to get in our lighting. Now as this starts to render, it starts to look a lot more realistic. Okay, so those are going to be the two settings you're going to want to use mostly. Now bear in mind, global illumination is going to really slow down your render times. So you might want to come in here to your settings, and the best way to keep those settings fast is to go into your ray depth and turn this way down, and your reflection depth. This has everything to do with how many bounces the light is basically doing in your scene. So you don't need 5 reflections unless you're doing a really complex city scene. You only need a couple. And that should already speed up our scene if I render. Yeah, it's chugging along a lot faster now that I've slowed those down. So that's kind of the basics, again, on furthering your animation. The only last thing to do here is to just check our output and our settings. Notice we're still just using the standard renderer. We'll get into more detail on what different types of renderers to use. But we're ready to export this scene and throw it in a picture viewer, and the same thing's going to happen. This is just going to start rendering out frames and save it in the location that you tell it to. Bear in mind, I still have the last render in here, and I can always go in here and I can always click Save As after I'm done and save my animation somewhere else and update this. So it's not just because you rendered it out that one time and saved it doesn't mean you can't go in and update that information now that you've as long as you just go back into picture viewer, that information will all be stored in there. So thanks for watching again this quick tutorial part 2 on how to set up your animations in Cinema 4D. Stay tuned for more.